Hey everybody, welcome to another Playful Humans podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague. You can find Playful Humans at playfulhumans.com. I didn't make it that difficult for you. My guest this week is Matthew Phelan. He is a happiness researcher, and you can find him at thehappinessindex.com. He also has a book out there, Freedom to Be Happy, and it's all about the business case for happiness, especially happiness and engagement in the workplace. So I'm super excited to talk with him about that this week, because it's all about what we've been talking about here, how to play for a living and how the power of play can be more powerful, I feel like, than the power of hard work in most cases. We're going to find out what Matt says here shortly. Don't wait for tomorrow. Keep chasing the sunshine. All right, Matt, welcome to the podcast. We like to start with the joke of the week. The joke of the week this week is brought to you by the Hokey Pokey. I was addicted to the Hokey Pokey, but then I turned myself around. The official joke of the week is two peanuts were walking down the street and one was assaulted. Okay. Matt, tell us a little bit about the Happiness Index, what you've been doing with happiness in your career and what you've found out along the way.
Yeah, so I started my first business a few weeks before the 2008 financial crisis.
Perfect.
And I'm a geek. My background is data. We were a data marketing company, and we had data on everything other than the thing that we said was the most important thing, which was our people. And we used to have this mantra that customers don't come first. We used to say, employees come first. If we look after our employees, they'll look after the customers, and guess what? We'll make money. That was the simplicity of it. But as a geek, I always like to think, you know, that thing that people say, is it actually true if you test it? So we just built this random piece of code to see if there was a correlation between happy employees and happy customers. That's all we were doing. We were just, to use your term, we were just playing. And that's how geeks play. We play with technology, and this thing was created, and one of our team said, oh, you should call that the Happiness Index. And then that became this big thing, and then out of it came a business, and now we're working over 100 countries, helping companies understand what makes their people tick. Once they know that, they can create a better work environment. Once you create a better work environment, your customers become happier, the company makes more money, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and a lovely cycle. So yeah, that in a snapshot, the Happiness Index is an employee engagement platform. And yeah, we have a lot of fun at work. And that's why I was really intrigued by the name of this podcast, Mike.
Yeah, and I've been really digging into this for probably the last 3 years or so. So you're way ahead of me, and you actually have the data on this. I've seen a lot of other people's research. I've used and quoted yours plenty, but I'm interested to hear what you think, and then maybe we can dive into why that is true. I think it's obvious to me that if people are happy, good things happen. When they're disgruntled, they're burnt out, they're not engaged, they're not giving their best effort, people aren't going to perform as well. But what I don't get is kind of why in our culture, hard work, putting in extra hours, staying past 5 o'clock and all kinds of things seems to be the way that people think they can get ahead or get more productivity out of their employees. And all the research I've seen says that that's not true, that it actually leads to worse results. In your experience, why do you think that is? And what do the numbers actually say?
So I think there's a few things to pick into there, and a few things to separate out, which is there's a kind of hustle culture over here where you're just working hard nonstop, not thinking about what you're working on. And I am actually someone, I love what I do and actually do work really hard.
Right,
so I actually enjoy working hard, but I only do the things in my role. I've got a very short attention span. So I've come on this podcast because I wanted to come on this podcast, not because I was told to come on this podcast. So once you're doing things that you want to do, everything just becomes a little bit easier. And we can delve into the science and the neuroscience behind that. But I always think of like, if you think of like digging a hole, like if you're digging the hole in the wrong direction, you could be working really hard, couldn't you? Really hard, and dig that hole every single day. But if the hole is going in the wrong direction and not going where you want it to go, no matter how, even if you work harder, you actually get further away from where you want to go. So I don't personally have a problem with working hard, but it's about finding out like what you enjoy doing. And let's say you're a scientist and you're trying to find the cure for some real illness. That may be your thing that you want to dedicate your time to. And I've been thinking a lot. I know this is really cheesy, but I think I've been a lot about, like, people always say, like, what's the meaning of life, don't they? And if I had to sum up all of our data in one sentence, I was thinking about this afternoon. I've not said this out loud yet, and I don't know if I've basically read this on a packet of crisps.
That's all right. We'll play with the idea. Yeah.
But for me, it's not about finding the meaning in life. It's about finding meaning in your work, because we do, whether you like it or not, whether people like it or not, we live in a society where you need to earn money to pay the bills, right? And you may be privileged and you may not have to do that, but let's park that. That's such a minimal amount of people. So for me, we do need to work. And if you can make that meaning in that, and you use the word playful really well, Mike, that's where I think like the magic happens. And although it can seem really dreamy and crazy for people that are, and people will be listening and they'll be hating their jobs, they'll have the Sunday night fear. They may be a single parent that can't just go, you know what, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. There's so many levels of privilege to this. But if you do plan it and you do get it right, I do think there is a route for everyone to follow. And when you do, we'll talk about neuroscience in a bit. Everything switches on, and work becomes much more enjoyable.
Yeah, there's so much to dig into there. You reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. It's a former Supreme Court justice called Howard Thurman. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive." And I feel like that's what you're saying about this meaning of life too, is that another philosopher was talking about dancing while the music's playing. That if you're too worried about your legacy or what happens after you die, or other kind of weird things about the meaning of life, you're not enjoying the moments and the times that you have here now. And I think, like, what else would there be than to enjoy the ride, to enjoy your life, experience as much as you want, and have share as many good feelings as possible with other people. I think all of those things are profoundly important. But I also kind of want to bring it back to the ROI, because I think there are still a whole ton of people, like you said, that maybe are saying, I can't just quit my job, or that's great, but my company still has to make payroll on Friday, and they're worried about, numbers, revenue, things like that. And I find it interesting that you measure it, because I've been pushing back a lot on any type of measurement. I got rid of my Fitbit and other things. Like, why am I measuring my steps? Somebody else came up with that measurement. I don't care how many steps I get a day. I care whether I feel good, whether I'm getting outside and exploring and enjoying the summertime. So I've kind of been pushing back on my body, and my mind will tell me whether I'm enjoying life and whether I'm doing the right things or not. I'll know inherently, and worrying about the big stuff. But I'd love to hear what you think about the numbers, because when I try to measure it, or I don't want to force play, and that's one of the things I struggle with on this podcast, is like, do I care how many people are listening and what the download counts are? Am I trying to artificially work harder at inflating a metric that nobody else cares about? Or am I worrying about doing the best show possible? I think it's really difficult once you start measuring something to not get hung up in the measurement and not what it was supposed to be trying to measure.
No, I love that, Mike, and it's also something I think about a lot. I like when I go on holiday, I don't bring my phone with me when I go for a run. Like, people find it weird. I did my first triathlon the other day, and I was chatting to all the other people, and they were like, "Oh, what's your times?" And I was like, "I don't know my times." And then,
Yeah.
and then another guy started calling me. He introduced me to another guy. He's like, meet this guy. This guy's the guy that doesn't know his times. It's like I became known as the guy that doesn't know his times.
But in our culture, it seems that weird, right? To actually just focus on enjoying. I did it to do the run. I didn't do it to beat a time.
Yeah,
like,
and
I'm not going to the Olympics. You know, I don't care what the time is.
And I will answer your question in a sec, but just to link in, I'm the same. For my own well-being and mental health, I run once a day. If I don't run once a day, my mind is just a mess. I feel like the world's going to end at every moment. If I go for a run, everything I can get everything into order. But that's what I realized. I run for my brain, not for my body. So one of the outcomes of that is I feel like in better shape. But I don't run to be in better shape. I don't run for my body. That's just a side thing that happens to be useful. But I run for my brain, and the outcome of that is other good stuff. But I just wanted to share that with you. But going back to your question, I think it's such a good question, and I think the core of the blame, I have to put on a saying that I used to love. So I want to admit that I used to love this saying. This is a business saying, which is, if you can measure it, you can manage it. And as a data geek, I came from that world where there was a John Wanamaker quote that was 50% of my marketing works. I just don't know what 50%. Really famous saying. The Googles of the world changed that through all the tracking and everything, which personally I think has gone too far. That's another podcast for us to record one day, Mike. And that's why I don't work in that industry anymore. But so marketing became more trackable. But the problem is, it's not true. So what I've started to realize, and this will never, ever be remembered because the quote is too long, but now the way I see it is, if you can measure it, you can better understand it. If you can better understand it, you can make better decisions. So I think if you take a Fitbit as an example, measuring it every day and then like going, oh, I've dropped off or I've got better or whatever is just it's a road to probably being unhappy. Whereas if you're just checking it and you're actually measuring it yourself, Mike, what you're doing is you're measuring how you feel. So you might not be using technology, but you're talking to yourself and you're measuring how you feel. So you're still measuring it and assessing it in the way that you described it. You're just not using technology, would be my interpretation. So for me, it's important to measure, but not always in the technology way, because you can actually relationships are like that. Like you may find that you've been friends with someone for the last 15 years and every time you see them, you feel bad. It doesn't mean you don't want to see that friend ever again, but maybe you want to have a chat about why when you're seeing that person. And that's about understanding your own feelings and measuring that. It doesn't have to be technology or Fitbit to do that.
You know, what you said really helped it hit home for me, is because I do like research. I love what you found, and I like, getting new information that will change what I'm doing or help me go forward. But I think it is the daily or monotonous measurements that cause the problem for me. That when I was getting into, I was a time management like junkie and trying to get into productivity and everything. And I was measuring everything. You do kind of find that like, okay, well, I feel worse about myself if I weighed a pound more this morning than I did yesterday. If I just don't measure it, I'm fine. I know about where I am and whether I feel good in my body or not, or whether the belt is an extra rung out is a better indication than what the pound says if I ate too much salt yesterday and stuff like that. But I think even for business, if, like you said, if we can use it to make decisions, that's great. If we're using it to measure daily progress and we're feeling bad on days that it goes down and good on days that it goes up, we're messing with our own psyche and our own performance on too micro of a level that I don't think is healthy for humans. Is that
I would. The only bit I would change is I don't even believe you should use data to make a decision. I just think you should use it to inform a decision, because there's loads of good examples, because data sets are never complete. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but one of the things that I think science and data needs to do better is admit, and I say this as someone who does research every day, we have to admit that the research that we have done is what happened in that moment of time in that data set. Because what happens is you do research, and it's what happened in that moment in time on that data set. You then take that, and then that is published as fact, which what it is it's the best understanding of that thing, whether that be how planes fly, medical stuff, or whatever, or happiness research. That is just what happened at that time. The problem is, by not saying that, what you then get is someone who goes and does their own research on the internet and they go, oh, I found this flaw in this research. That means that this research is a conspiracy. And quite rightly, you should feel like, I understand why people feel like that, because they've been told over here that science is fact. And I'm saying this as someone who believes in science. I'm saying we need to get better at explaining where our recommendations come from.
I feel the problem is actually the opposite is true, that they'll say, oh, this research in 1956 proved that, hourly wages are a better way to pay people than whatever. And they take that as true. Now in 2023, when we're working virtually and other things, you're like, okay, well, that was true maybe then. It doesn't mean it's true permanently. But I think that you're right. That is where people struggle, is on both sides, either giving it too much weight or not enough weight, depending on what they make the facts. And I've kind of found that to be true. So I want to talk to you a little bit about happiness and what we can do in our companies, because I love the way you set it up. I think you're right that people tend to believe what they're going to believe anyway, and then they're going to find the facts that they want to support it. But let's assume here for a second that you're an HR director, or you're a leader of a sales team, or you're somebody that wants to start their own organization or work on their own happiness. Well, I'm interested to know what you found that actually moves the needle, because I've kind of seen some things where we know that like pool tables or game rooms in Google don't really help attract or make people happier. They're make people that make a good case to, researchers that you're trying to have more fun, or maybe you can attract more employees. But then even things like unlimited vacation, if employees aren't allowed to take it, it doesn't matter if that policy is unmeasured. And that's something that was generated by the company to save money on accounting, not actually to have people take more vacation, right? And it can kind of be weaponized. So what have you found actually moves the needle for people?
Yeah, so let's look at the top 4 drivers of happiness. Also, I just want to break out one sort of misconception around happiness. And I'll just use the ancient Greeks to advise us on this. If we went back to ancient Greece, they would have like 2 terms for happiness. They would have basically eudaimonia, and they would have hedonism. So hedonism is more like joy. So it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Eudaimonia is like your ongoing state of how you feel. So it is normal for everyone to feel unhappy in a normal day. It's normal for people to feel happy and that to fluctuate. What's not normal is when it doesn't fluctuate. So you're deeply unhappy for a long period of time. That is a signal that you should go and speak to someone. But likewise, it's as much of a mental. It sounds hard for people to hear this, but it's as much as a mental health issue to be happy all the time is it to be unhappy all the time. There'd actually be a problem there that you would also need to go and what. So I just wanted to break that out, because sometimes it can become like this pressure to feel happy, and it will happen in people's events. Like, let's say you have you got children, Mike?
No.
So someone might have a child, right? The baby arrives, but you feel unhappy. But if you think about it, you've just gone through the most crazy event that could ever happen of this child coming into the world, and there's hormones all over the place, everything. So you may actually experience unhappiness at that point, but Hollywood has taught you that the clouds are going to come and the sunshine is going to be there and you're going to be super happy. So I just wanted to break the 2 out. One is supposed to fluctuate, and then one is that what we're trying to work towards in the work.
That makes sense.
And I want to share with everyone what the top 4 drivers of that. I won't do 3 of. I'll save the top driver to last, because that's universal and doesn't change. But for me, the starting point is always psychological safety. So that's one of the top 4 drivers. you're seeing a lot of that come out in a diversity and inclusion debate around what makes people feel comfortable at work. I actually think, when I think about what you do, Mike, and when I was watching your videos earlier and I was listening to your intro and psychological safety, I think there's a lot of barriers in people. I think every single one of us from our childhood and school has loads of trauma that stops us being able to be playful adults. That's just, again, that's another podcast for us to do another day. But I do think, like, we just, like, even me, I want to start like dancing along with the music. But I bet there's something in there that's just like some kid has taken the mick out of me at some dance when I was 14 that's stopping me do that.
Yeah.
We've got all this baggage that we're holding out, but psychological safety is that piece that allows us to be ourselves. So if we do want to dance along to Mike's music, then we should be able to feel comfortable that we're not going to be judged to do that. And just seeing you do it made me feel like I could do it. So that's part of it. It's like showing your team what's acceptable.
I think that's a huge one. If I can just respond real quick there, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see managers make is they punish people for mistakes and they look for mistakes rather than to catch people doing things right. And so if you feel like every time you make a mistake, somebody's going to, call it out on you, you don't feel safe enough to take risks. You start taking less and less risks doing things that even you think would be right because it might go wrong. And we see that a lot with teenagers and social media, that they're driving later or less or things because they don't want to make that mistake and have it end up on social media or have that wreck in the school parking lot and have everybody see it. And so that psychological safety is huge for me. And one thing I wanted to add just on a personal note was I do a ton of writing for my day job and sales training and stuff that I do. I mean, like 10,000 words a week. I'm on a podcast and a webinar. And it was like, you mentioned the culture and psychological safety. And I always feel like I'm trying to create that environment for everybody. But if somebody's going to say something wrong or use a wrong term, it's going to be me because I write all the words and I say all the words. So if even if it's a spelling error, I'm going to be the one that made it because I'm the one that wrote all the words, and I think like that, having the guts to be able to publish or to put yourself out there, you have to have a certain amount of psychological safety and forgiveness from your managers and coworkers to be able to do that.
Have you, I'm not guessing you are, Mike, but are you a big cricket fan?
No, in the United States, I haven't been established with much of that. But
I didn't want to make an assumption that, based on your accent, that you weren't. But now that we know that you're not a cricket fan, I just want to tell you a tiny little bit about cricket in the last 6 months. So England cricket team have been the worst performing team for the last year. They've just been getting beaten by everyone. I think they lost like 14 out of 15 matches. And everyone said, don't change the leader, because there's no one else to come in. It's such a small pool of cricketers. They changed the leadership team basically about 4 matches ago, and they have turned into an unrecognisable team of winners. And they are absolutely changed what cricket's about. Like, they're playing it like baseball. They're just smashing it out of the ballpark every time. And the reason I want to share that with you is because there's a headline. I'll just read it out on the BBC News. I'll try and show it on your screen here. I don't know if you can read that out for your listeners, Mike.
Yeah, freedom and clarity.
Yeah, and that brings me on to the second bit, which you'd already started to talk about. The next driver after psychological safety is freedom to take opportunities. So psychological safety is if you go for that boundary, as we call it in cricket, a 6. Psychological safety is knowing that your coach isn't going to drop you next match because you went for it, because you're going to miss it sometimes. Freedom to opportunity is the second part. Like, you create the psychological safety, and then it's the freedom to go, right, okay, I see an opportunity slightly different, we'll go this way. So that's the that's the second one. And personally, I'm going to get you to rank them for yourself as well, Mike, when we finished it, because I'd be interested, because it's also a good conversation starter with your team to actually ask each other, like, what's important, what's not. And you learn a lot through that. The next one, I think, is the most beautiful one of them all, and the simplest and easiest and free and cheap, and doesn't mean you have to be Google to afford to do this. This one is feelings of acknowledgement. So I just think that is beautiful, because we don't set this data, we don't set this neuroscience, we just see what's coming back. But don't you just find that really beautiful, that of all the things that human beings think they're achieving in technology and everything, it's still at its core. The second so one of the top drivers here is thank you. That's what it is.
and really it's that human acknowledgement that I exist, I've been seen, somebody appreciates what I'm doing. It's not that hard. And I love that those three to me all kind of go together. And I learned that myself very young. And maybe I put too much stock into it. Maybe it's also head trash that's held me back, but I like a low bar. I know some people love stretch goals and they're like, oh, if you just put that up there, then you'll think about ways to do it. And and I feel like if you keep moving the goalposts, you never get the satisfaction of actually hitting it. I prefer like, let's say you tell me what I need to do to not get fired. I'll make sure that's covered. And then I'll take some swings. I'll take that freedom to try new things, or you can say, hey, good job on that. And I know that I'm psychologically safe after I've hit that minimum threshold. And I think to me, all three of those kind of go together because I have a high need for approval. I like people to tell me I'm doing a good job. I like people to smile and have fun when they're working with me. And I want to know that I'm successful, even if we hit the minimum standards, not just only if we hit the super high stretch goal.
Yeah. What's interesting about that in your answer, you're different to most Americans in your answer. I'm just going on the data here.
Yeah.
To share, I'll go on to the top one in a second, just to share a point with you. The number one, which I'm about to share, which I'm teasing everyone with, is the same in every country. It's universal, right? Doesn't change. Let's pick two neighbors. Let's pick Canada and the USA. The second driver changes in terms of ranking in different countries. So in the United States, so I'm going to go into the top 8 now, and I'm going to bring engagement in. In the United States, the second driver is clarity. It's just clarity of your role. In Canada, it's feelings of acknowledgement. Now, I don't know, and I'm going to ask you to respond to that, Mike. I personally, my view on it, we don't know. We just see the data. My view on it is that in Canada, if you lose your job, it's not associated with things like healthcare. Whereas, like when I speak to colleagues in America, obviously, I don't want to get into the politics of it all, but if I lose my job tomorrow, my healthcare doesn't go. It will never go. I think as a parent, if I was working in the US business, I'd ask my boss at least once a week to be really frigging clear with me. Can you I'll be checking in all the time saying, am I doing my job right? I would want clarity all the time because I wouldn't want to put my family's health at risk. That's my interpretation. Might be a very European interpretation. Don't know what you think, Mike, on that point.
I'll give you a quick thought. I haven't obviously put that much thought into it, but I would say I see it more cultural, as Canadians seem to have like a nicer culture. They want more of a community and politeness in that if somebody didn't say thank you, they might take that as a slight. I also see that kind of as a British thing too, right? There's a lot of pleasantries that aren't necessarily in American culture, where if somebody doesn't say anything, you would take that as a slight. So that might be higher. And then for Americans, I think clarity is big because of our schooling, and we're all taught to get right answers and to follow instructions. And so we feel like there isn't as much risk if it's super clear. If a boss just tells you to go do ABC and you go do ABC, you don't have to be creative. You know what success looks like. There's no risk. And I feel like that's more about following directions and doing the work than it is about creativeness and exploring and success and happiness. That is really kind of my mission with Playful Humans, is to say, hey guys, we can have robots do ABC. We don't need clarity. What we need is somebody who can deal with ambiguity and come up with a creative solution or problem solve, that I think is lacking in American culture.
Well, that's fascinating. That is fascinating take on it, because that's a driver behind your work, really, Mike, isn't it?
Yeah. And so maybe that's skewed from my perspective, but what I would see is a lot of people are really happy to follow directions. And so if they have clarity in directions, they feel psychologically safe enough to do their work, and could be for the reasons that you outlined, could be for others. But I think they don't like ambiguity because that leads to failure. And we have a very like performance driven culture. But let's finally talk about that number one, and then we'll wrap up and play a game.
Yeah. So the final one does link to playing a game, which is positive relationships. So underestimated, but number one in every country. And I was really lucky enough to do a TED Talk recently, and specifically talk about this piece, because it's really, again, the point of the happiness index is not to have a view. Like, that's why I just gave out my personal view on the clarity piece. It's not the happiness index's view. It's just my thoughts, because we're supposed to just put the data out there and then people can help them make their decisions. But what is fascinating is you are effectively, all of us are the average happiness of the people around us. So if you read every self-help book out there, most of them say you can think yourself happy. But if the 6 people that you spend most of your time with are unhappy, that could be colleagues, that could be partners, that could be friends, you actually, like a homeostasis, like temperature, you actually come back to the average happiness of the people around you. So again, I'm not here to tell your listeners what to do about that, but it does create questions in your head. Let's take a job interview. I would be saying to one of your listeners, next time they go for a job interview, ask about the salary, ask about the job opportunities. But I would directly look the person in the eye, and I'd say, when they say to me, have you got any questions? I would say, Mike, I'd love to know how happy you are. I'd love to know how happy your team are. And I'd also love to know how happy the CEO is. And if they won't answer that question, I think that also tells you a lot about the culture. But if they're happy to talk about it, I think you're into potentially a good organization.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of other stats that, say people leave their managers. They don't really leave their jobs and stuff, right? If you have somebody that's a poor communicator, causing a lot of stress, dealing with a lot of drama in a workplace, all of the opposite of what you were talking about also causes the negative scores there. So I see that one on both sides of the coin for sure. And to me, it's been amazing. I've kind of seen different cultures in different organizations and kind of geographic things across the United States as I work. So I found there are pockets of places that are just seem to be more fun and more relaxed in their communications and the way that they work. And there are other places that are more driven. They're more abrupt in their communication. They're more results and data oriented than they are playful. And sometimes to me, it's funny. It's not where you think. So when I was in radio, we would have the on-air side. It was super fun and creative, and everybody's, doing their things. They're trying to create the best environment possible for people listening. But the sales team would be completely driven by a huge corporate conglomerate that's like owned by, CBS and Viacom and these huge international media conglomerates trying to drive numbers. And they're not having any fun whatsoever on their side, even though it's inside the same company. And I think that's really interesting. I would definitely think about that more in your next job or in your current position, is who are you working with and what's the average happiness of a meeting, of a day-to-day work, of the environment that you're spending the most of your time in. That's huge.
And I'll just leave your listeners one last bit of research to check out. It's very American focused. If you take 28 years of stock market data, the study was done by Alex Edmonds, professor in London. Companies with happier employees outperform their industry peers by somewhere between 2.4 and 3.6% per year over a 28-year period. So it's not 2 to 3.5% over the period.
Yeah, that adds up to a big number.
Yeah, so that's out there. Check out Alex Edmonds and the work there. This isn't just me and Mike being like believers in this stuff. It's all backed up. It's all out there. You can check it out.
It's crazy. I've seen stats that like salespeople that are happy and engaged sell 30% more than those that are not. Obviously, the customer success people have higher customer satisfaction scores and things. So it's crazy that it's not even their happiness, but their happiness correlates to the customer's happiness and all kinds of great stuff like that.
I think it's really simple. If you drive someone by fear and pressure, you can have a good quarter, good 6 months, maybe a good year. But if you're driving people through purpose and stuff like that, you're going to get the long-term sustainable growth. So I think what happens is you get managers come in, they really drive people, but then those people leave and blah, blah, blah. and it's called Super Chickens. It's effectively is a book on it. You basically end up with like the super chickens performing, but everyone else is falling by the wayside. But all that gets recognized is the ones that were like that performed, but you lost all the people that didn't. So it's a team game, really.
That's amazing. Once again, we're talking with Matt Phelan, and you can find him at thehappinessindex.com. Also has a book out there, Freedom to Be Happy, and all about the stuff we've been talking about today for corporate culture. So I encourage you to go check out thehappinessindex.com. But now, Matt, it's time to play a game. Do you want to play?
Yes, please, Mike.
That was your freedom to choose. I've never had anybody say no. I feel like there's some pressure. But, all right. We spun the wheel and you got awkward questions. I haven't looked at any of these yet, but you feel like a person that could handle an awkward question. What would you rather sit on, a hot stove or an anthill?
Oh, definitely an anthill. Definitely an anthill. I love nature.
Yeah, I feel like that's an easy one there. What would you rather stick your hands into, liquid nitrogen or boiling water?
Well, I've stuck my hand on my the day on my honeymoon. I had boiling water poured over my hand by my wife by accident. So I would just have to try the other one because I've not tried that one before, and then I could compare.
Yeah, that's good. I've played with liquid nitrogen, but I never injured myself. I used to teach math and science for like a special AmeriCorps project, like a community service deal. It was super fun.
I can imagine you being awesome at that, Mike. I would love to be taught by you.
Yeah, it was for like out of work elderly and then like inner city kids that didn't get enough math and science education. And the kids were great. They had a ton of fun, loved the experiments. But teaching computer skills to the elderly in like the late 90s was an amazing experience. There was a guy so old he couldn't double click. He would like click and then click it again. But that was as fast as he could go. And we had to find
I'm really proud of my mum because she fitted into that category. And even when she went to her first computer lesson, her best friend got her a block of cheese and said like, my mum was like, why have you got me a block of cheese? And she said, oh, it's for the mouse. And like all her friends were taking the mick out of her because she was going to get these lessons. But now she's like the pro teaching them all. So I got a lot of respect for those people that went to those lessons with you, Mike.
Yeah, it was awesome. He was emailing his grandkids at college is what he wanted to learn how to do. That's amazing. That's super cool. All right, last one. If you created a dinner party of 10 people, would you rather have 10 celebrities or 10 political figures?
Well, I think today that's the same thing, sadly. But I'll pretend you asked me the question in 1990, and I'll go politics.
Interesting. Do you feel like why is that?
I just think have you watched Hamilton?
Yeah.
You know the song I wasn't in the room when it happened. That I don't think there's a better written song about anything ever to be more true and more brilliant than that song. And you just don't know what happened unless you were in the room. And I'd like to find out what happened in all these years.
I have some theories on that too. I feel like you and I could talk all day. It's already one of our longest podcasts here, so we'll wrap it up.
Mike.
But I agree with you there. I think we would be shocked at how little people thought of their decisions in most cases, and then we would also be shocked at sometimes how smart and intelligent the people were. I think those are the two ends of the spectrum. I think we all think that like there's some Illuminati that is like in charge of everything. And in most cases, people are just humans like us trying to figure it out as they go along. And they really don't have any more information than anybody else. And other times, like in America's founding fathers, there were people that really spent a lot of time thinking about the future of what an ideal country would be, and way more time than most Americans have spent putting that together.
We got about four follow-up podcasts to do here, Mike.
We do. We'll follow up with those. But until next time, if you can't be good at it. That's what I always say. And go check out Matt at thehappinessindex.com. Any other final thoughts, Matt?
No, just thank you, Mike. Really appreciate you. Love your work.
I appreciate yours as well. I'm excited to dig in and read the book too, as well. That's freedom to be happy. Until next time, go to playfulhumans.com. Make sure you send this podcast to somebody that needs to hear it. Now go play, everybody. Hey, you did it. You made it to the end. But don't worry, there are plenty of more videos where that came from. Just click subscribe to Playful Humans to get notified about our future videos. Now, what are you still doing here? Go play.